A New York civil rights lawyer says she will appeal after a jury finds her guilty of smuggling violent messages from her client, a convicted terrorist, to his supporters on the outside. Fox News correspondent Jamie Colby is following this story live from our New York City newsroom. Jamie?
Hi, John. Good morning. Where do you draw the line, John, between zealous legal representation and becoming a criminal accomplice? The latter is what a federal jury determined civil rights attorney Lynn Stewart became when she represented Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, the blind cleric convicted in 1995 of plotting to blow up New York landmarks and assassinate Egypt's president. The jury deliberating for 12 days, agreeing with prosecutors that Stewart helped the jailed sheikh communicate with the outside world and terrorists. A tearful Stewart vowed to fight the conviction of conspiracy, providing material support to terrorists, defrauding the government, and making false statements that could put the 65-year-old behind bars for 45 years.
This case could be, I hope it will be, a wake-up call to all the citizens of this country and all the people who live here, that you can't lock up the lawyers. You can't tell the lawyers how to do the job. You've got to let them operate. And I will fight on. I'm not giving up. I know I committed no crime. I know what I did was right.
U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales calling the conviction of Stewart a victory in the fight against terrorism. Today's verdict, he said, is an important step in the Justice Department's war on terrorism. The convictions handed down by a federal jury in New York today send a clear, unmistakable message that this department will pursue both those who carry out acts of terrorism and those who assist them with their murderous goals. The conviction actually came down yesterday. Stewart's attorney argued to the jury that the government intruded into the attorney-client privilege when it eavesdropped on Stewart's conversations in prison with her client. Stewart will be sentenced, John, July 15th. John.
All right, Jamie Colby, live in Fox Central. Thank you. So some lawyers who take on politically unpopular cases say they see the Lynn Stewart conviction as a warning they could be prosecuted as well. Is this a one-of-a-kind case, or might other lawyers get in trouble as well? Let's check in with the mayor of Englewood, New Jersey. Michael Wilds is a former federal prosecutor. And Michael, we brought you in here in part because you have taken on sort of these kinds of cases before. You're an immigration lawyer. You've represented some people who were accused of terrorism, right?
I represented several defectors, scientists, and even a terrorist where each of them had not only wanted to cooperate with the government, but it was made clear that if they didn't cooperate with the government, I wouldn't continue to represent them. And the ground rules were set. They were set in stone, John. There was no way that I was going to cross this line. There was an attorney-client privilege that I always respected. But as far as conveying information, becoming a courier, a liaison, if you would, between a terrorist and terrorist cells internationally or domestically, there was a fine line that was clearly crossed here. She aided and abetted terrorists. She is as guilty as the terrorists themselves. And in this web of terrorism and in these very dangerous times, lawyers, anybody who act as a weapon, if you would, in effecting this need to be prosecuted as sternly as the defendant.
Well, Lynn Stewart looks sort of like a kindly grandmother, and in fact she is a grandmother. You know, the tearful outburst there on the courthouse steps notwithstanding, she was convicted of some pretty serious stuff. Her client, Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, is the guy who was convicted of trying to blow up New York City landmarks, trying to blow up a couple of the major commuter tunnels into New York City. And the government said that she was spiriting his messages to his followers out of jail. She was bound by an agreement. She had signed an agreement that said she's not going to communicate or not going to take his messages out, and she did that.
You know, I don't care much about appearances. I don't care if Hitler played the harmonica. The bottom line is, when you facilitate terrorism, you facilitate terrorism. I had to sign agreements when I dealt with intelligence services on private defections and on public defections. When I would meet in a secure facility with federal authorities, there were rules, and those game rules were respected. Now, attorney-client privileges were respected, and everybody had a day in court. But in this case, John, this defendant, this sheik, who tried to blow up and effect all sorts of other terrorist acts, all of his appeals had run. Where was the representation? What was she doing dealing with him? If anything, she was facilitating and doing things beyond the pale. And this is what's happening in America right now. We cannot hide behind the potential loss of our civil liberties and shield ourselves from facts.
So you don't think this is going to have a chilling effect on lawyers who defend unpopular clients?
I think that lawyers have to protect unpopular clients. Everybody in this country is innocent till proven guilty. This lawyer crossed the line. You cannot blur the facts here. The fact is she facilitated terrorism. She's being prosecuted for that. Other lawyers who believe fundamentally in liberal rights and have a sense of the national immigration system, that we are a land of immigrants, are noble people that are trying to remind us of our core beliefs. This is a lawyer that crossed that line.
Yeah. All right, Michael Wilds, thank you. And as we look at Abdel Rahman, it should be noted that several of his followers were people who blew up the World Trade Center the first time back in '93. A prison riot in Argentina. Hundreds of prisoners stage an uprising there and take 24 guards hostage. The inmates said to be armed with homemade knives and guns are demanding better conditions. At least 4 people were killed in the riots, 20 others hurt. Negotiations underway now to end the siege. Police arrest an Oregon man for trying to arrange a mass suicide on Valentine's Day. 26-year-old Gerald Crean faces charges of solicitation to commit murder. Investigators have seized his computer. Now they're trying to figure out if the pact involving 32 people is real. Dozens of people apparently signed on to use webcams and the internet to coordinate their suicides on February 14th. She admitted to killing her newborn baby. Now a woman in Atlanta has been given an ultimatum by a judge: undergo medical sterilization or face murder charges. Fox News correspondent Jonathan Seri is in our Atlanta bureau with that live report. Jonathan?
Hi, John. The woman in question is named Carissa Ash. Over the course of her life, she has given birth to 7 children. The previous 6 are either living in state foster care or with relatives, and the 7th child never made it past 5 weeks. Ash pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter for the December shaking death of her daughter Destiny at their home here in Atlanta. Now, hypothetically, she could have faced up to 20 years in prison, but under a plea bargain, she was sentenced to 5 years probation and will avoid any prison time by agreeing to undergo medical sterilization.
The best thing that could happen is that she not be involved in this continuous process of having children. That certainly serves the ends of our community better than simply putting this woman in jail who might have been the victim of postpartum depression.
With due respect to the district attorney, how can a criminal act of violence be appeased by a medical procedure alone? The criminal justice system is set up to punish, not for his social engineering.
The Southeastern Legal Foundation, a conservative advocacy group, says Ash should have received a stricter sentence. After all, 5 years probation is what people in this state get for purse snatching and bar fighting. And a local chapter of the National Organization for Women has criticized the sentence for making sterilization a part of it.
You either prosecute a woman on the basis of the merits